Well, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Jim, want to give us the minutes of the last meeting?
Yes, sir. The first meeting held via Zoom of the Goingsnake District Heritage Association was called to order by President Jack Baker at 10:10 a.m. with 18 members present. This was our first meeting since we met at the John F. Henderson Library in Westville, Oklahoma on February 15th. Secretary Jim Terry read the minutes of the February 15th meeting, and they were approved as read. The treasurer's report was given by David Hampton. Total money as of June 20th, 2020 was $14,730. The report was approved as given. Jack Baker announced the Oklahoma Historical Society grant that we applied for has been approved. Maribel Chase gave her Cherokee Moments presentation, reading from records of the Cherokee Agency in Tennessee from 1801 to 1835 that she had researched on microfilm. Maribel mentioned these records can also be found on Fold 3 and emphasized their importance for the historical and genealogical information they contain. David Hampton's program was about the Genealogy Bank website that contains obituaries and historic newspapers going back to 1700. The newspapers that can be found here include digitalized records of the Cherokee Advocate. David explained how to use the website using search parameters by name or event. David Hampton made a motion to subscribe to Zoom for a year, costing $140.90 as opposed to $14.99 monthly. The motion was seconded and passed by unanimous vote. Jack Gardner told us about some Confederate monuments that were being moved to Kerrville, Texas. President Baker adjourned the meeting at 11:10 a.m.
Okay. Please, Jim. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'd entertain a motion for their approval.
I so move.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion carried. David, you have our treasurer's report?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the checking balance at June 20th was $6,132. We had income, Ruth says here $230 of dues plus $86 ACH. Wouldn't that also be dues, Luke?
Yes. Those are dues that came in via PayPal.
Okay, she didn't include them in her new dues payment list. So I don't know, does she get a list of those?
Yes, and I sent her a list of everyone that's made a payment on PayPal.
Okay. So the total checking balance is $6,449. There was paid outs for editorial expenses to Luke of $73, to Siloam Springs Printing for $646, and to U.S. Postal Service for $64. So that leaves a checking balance of $5,665. The CD interest earned was $9. So the ending balance of the CD is $8,607. So the total money as of July 18th is $14,272.
Are there any questions? If not, the treasurer's report will stand approved. Yeah. Okay. Maribel, your Cherokee.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi.
It's good to see everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Okay. My Cherokee Moments for this morning is documents and correspondence from the Cherokee Agency from 1865 to 1866. And these records are from National Archives microfilm publications, microcopy number 234, roll 100, letters received by the Office of Indian Affairs, 1824 to 1821. but this is Cherokee Agency from 1865 to 1866. And I'm going to try to read fast because I have a lot to give you this morning, and I don't want to encroach on Jack's program. This is a statement of expenses of John Ross, Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nation, while with the delegation at Washington, D.C. And I find these invoices and bills and things really interesting because it just to me, they're just very interesting. Other people may not find it so. And these are itemized expenses. Bill for traveling expenses, boarding, and so forth, $358, submitted April the 9th, 1866. Boarding from April the 9th to June the 9th, $122. And this was for 61 days at $2 per day and washing and so forth. And then the next is attendance on John Ross in sickness. Boarding of Miss Stapler from April the 4th to June the 4th, $94. 2 months at $47 per month. Boarding of Miss Annie Ross from April the 4th to June the 4th, 2 months, $47 per month, for a total of $94. Boarding of John Ross for 24 days at $1.50 per day, and that total was $36. Extra food and so forth for John Ross in sickness, $20. Boarding of Mrs. Nave, 5 weeks at $10.50 per week for a total of $52.50. Bill of G.W. Narn and Brother, druggist, $77.05. Bill of Dr. Hall for medical attendance, $500. And then here's a letter. Department of the Interior, Washington, D.C., August the 31st, 1866. Sir, in the matter of relieving the family of the late John Ross, upon which you reported asking instructions today, I am of opinion that the agreement transmitted by you is not binding on the Cherokee Nation. Funds cannot be paid under the 23rd article of the recent treaty with the Cherokees, except on the order of the National Council or a delegation duly authorized by it. It does not appear that the delegation which made this agreement were authorized to give any order under this clause of the treaty. If in your opinion, the family of Mr. Ross are suffering, you are authorized to allow them a reasonable sum for their relief out of any funds applicable to destitute Indians in the Southern Superintendency. And if you remember, in January, when we were still meeting at the library, I gave you some records out of the Southern Superintendency, which the predecessor was the Western Superintendency. And you can find a lot of information that you'll find in other records that will be just a little bit more. This correspondence was written by James Harlan, who was secretary, and it was sent to Honorable D.N. Cooley, the Commissioner of Indian Affairs. And another correspondence, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, August the 30th, 1866. Honorable James Harlan. Dear Sir, pardon the liberty and deem it not presumption for nothing, but the most dire necessity compels me to apply to you in this dark hour of misery and utter extremity, consequence upon the affliction dispensation of divine providence in depriving us of our beloved father. By this irreparable loss, we are left in a deplorable condition in this land of strangers, so far from our own Cherokee home, penniless and in debt. My cousin, D.H. Ross, informed me prior to leaving for the nation that he would write to General Ewing to make some arrangement with you and your successor to grant an allowance for the relief of my sister Annie B. Ross and myself. Our beloved and most worthy friend, Bishop Sampson, on hearing of our necessitous situation, assured us he would write to you on our behalf. But unfortunately, he left, I understand, for his Western tour of 6 weeks before hearing from you. I write, honored sir, to ascertain whether we may hope for relief at your hands or not. Unless you do help us, we know not what to do. We can do nothing to relieve ourselves until there is a settlement of the estate. I need not go into detail of all our troubles, feeling that you know enough to elicit for us your sympathy and aid. If you cannot do anything for us in the way my cousin D.H. Ross has requested, will you not allow me to beg your individual assistance in favoring me with a loan? I'm sure you will be refunded. As a brother in Christ and one that noble fraternity, I feel that you will not turn a deaf ear to the distressed cry of the Hosanna from the widow and orphans of those who are gone to take up their abode in that house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Please let me hear from you at your earliest convenience, and please help us. You will oblige and have the grateful thanks of those who will ever crave for heaven's richest blessings to be showered upon thee and thine. Very respectfully, Jane R. Nave. And her address is number 13 North New Street, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And okay, I'll go ahead and read this. I must hurry. Number 500 8th Street, Washington, D.C., April the 23rd, 1866. And this was written to Honorable D.N. Cooley, Commissioner of Indian Affairs. Sir, it has become our painful duty to inform you of the deep affliction which have come upon us and our nation. God, in his mysterious providence, has removed from earth Judge Thomas Pegg, a member of our delegation. After a short but painful sickness, his spirit took its flight at about 8:30 on the evening of April the 22nd instant. The funeral will take place from Joy's Hotel, corner of 8th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue at 2:00 tomorrow p.m. Very respectfully, your obedient servants, John Ross, Principal Chief, S.H. Benj, James McDaniel, Whitecatcher, Daniel H. Roth, Smith Christie, J.B. Jones, and these are all delegation of the Cherokee Nation. And if I'm not mistaken, Thomas Pegg is buried in the Congressional Cemetery there in Washington, D.C. And here is the estate of Judge Thomas Pegg, April the 24th, and this is his funeral expenses. Coffin and case, $75. Hearse, $6. Opening a grave, $4, for a total of $10. 12 carriages at $4 each, and that comes to $48. Dressing the body, $5. Attendance, $5, and his total funeral was $143 with an additional $5 for D.H. Ross for shaving the corpse. It was paid by D.H. Ross. He didn't do it, but it was paid by him, $5 for shaving the corpse. And this was for a total of $148. And do I have time to read something that may be a little lengthy? All this is just so interesting to me. And I just, would I have time, Jack?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, I'll try to hurry. This is
Right.
and this is going to give you a route that they took from the Cherokee Nation to Washington, D.C. I found this very interesting because I wouldn't have thought that they would have gone this way, but it was probably more convenient. Statement of expenses of Daniel H. Ross, delegate of the Cherokee Nation from November the 24th, 1865 to April the 9th, inclusive, 1866, to wit, paid cash for conveyance for self and national papers from Fort Gibson to Fort Smith, and that was $25. Paid board at Captain Christie's, and that was $5. Lunch, fruits, cake, and so forth at Fort Smith, $6.25. Provisions for the journey to Little Rock, $8.75. Fruits, cake, and so forth, $3.25. One night in Fort Smith, $2. Paid for pork en route to Little Rock, $2.50. Paid for forage for 10 mules, $5.75. Paid for farrage of Arkansas and Piney, $6.25. Paid teamsters, $5. Paid at Anthony House in Little Rock, $8. Paid at Anthony House for extra room and fire, $4.50. Paid passage to Duval's Bluff, $5. Paid passage to Memphis, $15. Porterage at Rock and Memphis, $2.50. Passage from Memphis to Cairo, $10. Passage to East Tennessee, excuse me, that was wrong. Passage to East St. Louis, $6. Paid for sleeping car for party, $14. Paid for refreshments en route, $5. Paid for crossing on the ice to St. Louis, $5. Paid for board at Lindell Hotel, $24. Paid for transportation to Philadelphia, $33.03. Paid for hack and baggage, $5.75. Paid restaurant, $2.50, for a total of $8.25. Paid for a sleeping car for 6 for 2 nights, $18. Refreshments from St. Louis to Philadelphia, $6.75. Board at Continental Hotel in Philadelphia, $1.50. Pay, and this is some entertainment that they had. Paid for admission to Menagerie, $3. Paid for admission to Blitz, Ledger, Demain, and so forth, $3. Paid for admission to Ethiopian minstrels, $4.50. Paid for ice cream and so forth, $4.90. Concert in St. Louis for $6. Porterage, omnibus, and car fare in Philadelphia, $4.10. Restaurant supper for $6, $4.50. Passage from Philadelphia to Washington, $5. Refreshments on cars and ride to Willard's, $1.25. Board at Willard's, $33.75. Paid for 3 months board to April the 9th at Joey's, $150. Paid for supper for party at restaurant, $5. Paid for ice cream and cake for party, $3.66. Paid for one box of cigars on behalf of delegation, $10. Paid for restaurant, ice cream, saloon, fruit and confection bills, $48. Paid for telegrams, $4.80. Paid for News Chronicle, Tribune, and Herald Intelligence, $15. Paid for Congressional Globe, $2.25. Paid for paper, inkstand, ink, envelopes, and so forth, $13.20. Paid for mucilage and wrapping paper and pens, $4. Postage stamps, $7.50. One telegram on public business, $9.80. Supper and porterage at Cairo, $1.75. And last of all, washing and mending, $17.50, for a total of $720.29. And imagine today paying for 6 people, no telling what the cost would be. And
Unbelievable.
I beg your pardon?
I said, that's unbelievable.
I know it is.
Mary
And
Bell,
what?
what was the source that you got all this in?
Okay, do you need the citation?
Yeah, you said it to begin with, but I didn't.
Okay, it's National Archives Microfilm Publications, microcopy number 234, and it's roll 100. And did you get that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Roll
And
100.
he's certified.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
You said it was the National Archives.
Yes, National Archives. And he's certifying on honor that the above statement of expenses incurred by me since leaving my home in the Cherokee Nation, November the 24th, 1865, including board to 9th of April, 1866, is correct and just, and that the sum of $720.29, as above stated, has been expended by me in behalf of myself and comrades as representatives of the Cherokee Nation before the government of the United States, and is signed Daniel H. Ross, Delegate, Washington, D.C., March the 29th, 1866. And I'm sorry I took so long. That concludes I have some more, but that'll just be for another time. That concludes my Cherokee moments for this morning.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Okay. Do we have any old business? Anything from you, Luke?
Just to recap very quickly, we were awarded the grant from OHS Grants and Aid, and part of that goes for the design of a new website. I solicited 3 bids from website designers this last month, and the board has reviewed all 3, and I think we found one that we really like. The company is called Megaphone Pro. They're from Salisaw, and they'll be able to design us a new website that is under the budgeted, which is great. So we'll have some money left over to put toward our other purchases for grant items. So this next week, I'll be corresponding with the web designer and sending some photos and text and that sort of thing to get the ball rolling on a new website for our group.
Good.
Appreciate it, Luke. Okay. Do we have any other old business? Or do we have any new business? And nothing from you, David?
Not that I know of.
Anna, it's good to have you.
Thank you.
There's
Did Anna get on here?
I'm here. Yes. Hi, Anna.
Oh, I
Oh.
see her.
And Curtis, do you have a camera? Because your picture isn't showing.
No, it didn't.
Haven't heard a word out of him.
I'm guessing he can hear us, but he must not have a camera or microphone.
Well, that's unusual.
He may be from his home computer that doesn't have a microphone. Okay. Well, we
Jack?
would see- yes.
This is Laura. I had emailed David about the death of Larry Griffin,
Yes.
and I had also talked to Donna Clark about it. I was able to find some information. I mean, I have a second cousin who had been married to him at one point, and her sister had. And I found a great deal of information that I forwarded on to Donna since she wanted to do something in the next issue of the TLNM. But it was quite lengthy, a quite lengthy write-up. I had no idea about his entire life. It was quite impressive and quite interesting. And I just didn't know if you all had that information.
Other than hearing about his death, but I did know that he did have a rather distinguished career.
Right. Yeah. That's apparently, someone did a lovely write-up about his career. And so I know I forwarded that information to Donna. She just was interested in it for the next publication.
Okay.
But I don't know anything. I just saw something on Facebook from that second cousin about his passing. I don't know what happened, but I just remember in his talk, he mentioned chemo, and he had written a poem, some poetry about that. So that's my assumption, but I really don't have any details as to what happened.
Okay.
We never mentioned anything, I don't think, about the death of Charlie Nguyen, one of our members that came to the meeting a lot.
That's right. And his memorial service was last Saturday. So I think he was still living at the meeting. Yeah, Charlie always came and sat back and was always smiling and very friendly. So we're going to miss him at our meetings. So, okay. Do we have anything else, or are you ready for my presentation on Thomas Mckinney?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And Luke, can you, can you put me on share screen?
Let me see if I know how to do that.
David.
If I can do it, I know how.
Go ahead.
But since Luke's hosting, does he have to do it?
Maybe. Look, there's a security button on the bottom, and then you click on that and it will let share screen.
Oh, and Anna, my laptop is messed up that has my camera. Okay. Well,
Is that your screen, Jack?
I didn't. It wasn't earlier. Okay, okay, can you see?
You see Zoom.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what popped up on mine. That wasn't my.
Well, open your PowerPoint.
Because my PowerPoint is on my screen. When I click on it, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Well, I saw a message that said that screen sharing was allowed after Luke clicked on it. Okay, Jack has started. Okay, we see it.
It
now.
is,
Here
yeah.
we go.
Yes.
Okay.
Hooray. Gotcha.
Okay,
Okay, now you can see it.
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. On top of that, Thomas Lorraine McKinney, 1785 to 1859. He was the superintendent of Indian trade from 1816 to 1822. And then he was the superintendent of Indian affairs, 1824 to 1830. Now, he was born in 1785 in Maryland to Quaker parents, and he was raised on his parents' plantation named Hopewell in Maryland. And while a young man, he settled in Georgetown at the District of Columbia. And in spite of his Quaker upbringing, he became adjutant of the 1st Legion of the Militia of the District of Columbia during the War of 1812. Then in 1816, he was appointed the superintendent of Indian trade by President James Madison. And he was over all of Indian trade in this position, including being over all of the Indian factories. And the factories were actually trading establishments operated by the U.S. government, such as the one at the Tellico Blockhouse in East Tennessee, and the one at the Arkansas Post on the Arkansas River. And he also was able to approve licenses to trade. Well, we'll get into, he actually had a lot of trouble with John Jacob Astor during his time, because John Jacob Astor was what he did things that he shouldn't be doing.
Pretty good.
But another duty was to furnish clothing to Indian delegations as requested by the Secretary of War. And each of the delegates received one hat, one blanket, one jacket, one waistcoat, one pantaloons or cloth equivalent for leggings, 2 pair of stockings, and 2 pair of strong shoes. Early in 1814, 26 Cherokees, including 2 women who were to be supplied with any articles of female apparel of equal value. So, and then in 1815, there were 15 Cherokees visiting. And then in 1816, in early 1816, there were 66 Cherokees. And all of them received this, and all the other tribes that came, they were all receiving these same items. And during this time, he also started up a correspondence with the Gambles at Spring Place. And he writes in his memoirs, he says, McKinney says, a newspaper fell into my hand in which was a letter from the Reverend John Gamble, dated Spring Place, Cherokee Country. This good man was a Moravian and a missionary. From this letter, I learned something of his hopes and prospects in regard to the condition of the Cherokees. I immediately opened a correspondence with him, as also with his helpmate, for she was truly such, which continued with both of them till their death. This old lady, well known at Bethlehem in Pennsylvania as Sister Clyce, had separated herself from her charge as directress of the Bethlehem Academy to unite her destiny with the good Mr. Gamble and assist him in his missionary labors. Among at that time an almost united people, no longer as Sister Clyce, was Zena Gamble. And then he goes on to say, Mr. Gamble enjoyed the confidence of the Cherokees in a greater degree than the white man then living. But he kept up that correspondence, he said, up until their deaths. And then, while he was superintendent of trade, he says, the desirability of making a permanent record of the features of the more prominent American Indians tribes had its inception about the year 1821. The official in charge being the superintendent of Indian trade, Thomas L. Mckinney. Whoops. So Mckinney, along with James Hall, worked and published the history of the Indian tribes of North America with biographical sketches and anecdotes of the principal chiefs. And this came out, I believe, in 1836. And because during his time, the different, oh, and by the way, sidebar, you can locate this book and many others online at the Hathi Trust Library. If you just Google the Hathi Trust, and that's THI Trust, and it's usually written as one word, but you can do it in two separate ones, it'll still come up in Google. You go to their digital library and you can look all kinds of older books. There's several editions of Mckinney and Hall. Bring up different ones of those, his memoirs. On this website are such as the Calendar of Virginia State Papers, Records of North Carolina, the Missionary Herald that was published by the American Board in Boston, the Baptist Messenger, tens of thousands of these older volumes. They're on the website. It's just fantastic. Okay, but some of the portraits was he did one at Sequoia, and in his memoirs later, in 1846, he wrote, "It is my firm belief that in proportion to population, there are more Cherokees who read either the English or their own tongue, the latter by means of an alphabet invented by one of themselves, to be found among the whites in any of the states of the Union." So basically saying the Cherokee Nation was more literate than any state. And I think that is true. But here's some of the other portraits of Cherokees. It's Tachi, or Dutch, is Tunica, or Spring Frog, David Van, who is the son of Avery and Margaret McSwain Van. And most of what I'm going to give you from Mckinney's memoirs, which has which was published in 1846. And the Department of Indian Trade was abolished in 1822. And then Mckinney became the Superintendent of Indian Affairs by an appointment from President James Monroe in 1824. Then in discussing the removal of the Cherokees, Mckinney talks about the various treaties which all contain provisions which would be removed from their lands. Because intruders were always a major problem for the Cherokees. The delegation that visited England in 1762 to visit King George III complained of this, and the next year the king issued the proclamation of 1763 forbidding the white settlements on Indian lands west of the Appalachians. But the intruders continued to be a problem all during the Cherokee time in the East. and even after removal, because it had a really bad time with them in the 1880s and 1890s. So McKinney refers to the 1819 treaty, as well as the treaty under Jefferson of March 30th of 1802, where he said that the intruders were prohibited from the Cherokee lands. So I'm going to be giving you stuff from his memoirs now. Reading from it, it says that all encroachments from the lands not ceded by the Indians to the United States and all trespasses were forbidden by these treaties, and that the authority and power of the United States were solemnly pledged to protect the Cherokees from intrusions and trespasses, and the treaties with that tribe, as well as others, make manifest. So the forms of law for this act was approved by, one was a treaty approved by Thomas Jefferson. He goes on and says, so far as my experience went, or my knowledge, it wasn't until several months after General Jackson's accession to the presidency, regarded as the law of the land, had been enforced in good faith by the government as such. One example out of many occurs to me. Trespassers had encroached on the Cherokee lands, put up cabins, and planted corn. Complaints were made by the Cherokees to their agent. The agent proceeded, as was the custom, to drive them off. They resisted. He reported the case to me, and I to the then Secretary of War, Mr. Calhoun. Forthwith, under the binding obligations of the Treaty of 1819 and of the sanction of this law of 1802, ordered Captain Turk, then stationed to march with a confident force to the district encroached upon and order the intruders off. If they refused to go, to cut down their corn and demolish their cabins. If they resisted, to employ force. They did resist. A battle was fought in which some or more of the trespassers were killed. These intruders, being citizens of Georgia, the authorities of that state arrested Captain Turk for murder. The case was tried in a Georgia court and by a Georgia jury, and he was acquitted. Thus were the Indians treated with good faith and the law vindicated. But this law was destined at last, though unrepealed, to become a dead letter. The solemn compacts with the Indians guaranteed to them protection were treated as things obsolete or regarded as mockeries. In the face and in violation of the provisions of the one and of the enactments of the other, surveyors were permitted to the Indian territory, roam over it, lay it off into counties, and proceed in all things for settlement as though no Indians occupied it. The law existed with interference of the government. In vain did the Indians implore the government to protect them. In vain did they call upon the attention of the provisions of treaties and to the pledges of the law. It was when these outrages first began to show themselves, thinking President Jackson could not be aware of their existence, that I called on him and referred to them, also to the provisions of laws and treaties that guaranteed to the Indian freedom from such trespasses, for he's superintendent of Indian affairs at this time. Jackson's answer was, the sovereignty of the states must be preserved, concluding with a termination so solemn and the whole being spoken in a manner so emphatic by me that he had concluded to permit Georgia and the other states were included to take their own way and their plans to harass, persecute, and force out their Indian populations. Finally, General Jackson was to leave for the Hermitage, the Secretary of War, Major Eaton. The latter, on his way to consummate under the treaty form the conventional arrangements I'd established in 1826 with the Chickasaw and Choctaw Indians, he had not left the president's mansion more than an hour and Dr. Randolph, chief clerk of the War Department, and who was brother-in-law of Major Eaton, and who had been left acting Secretary of War, came to my room saying, "The President and Secretary of War wanted me to see you and requested to prepare a circular addressed to the Indians." "What is the nature of the address?" I asked. "And to what Indians is it to be sent?" "Why," he answered, "the general said you would know all about it." "This is the first I've heard of this circular, Doctor. I can prepare it." "Oh, that is nothing," he replied. "You have the business at your fingers' ends and must know what he means." I wrote a circular of general import, but nothing very particular or very important. Taken to the acting Secretary of War, asked if that was what the Secretary and President wanted. "The very thing," he answered. I soon discovered that Dr. Randolph's position as acting Secretary of War was nominal, and that there was a real acting secretary at hand. For I'd not been back to my chair 10 minutes when Frank, the colored messenger of the War Department, to have been born white, into my room, saying with his always bland and obliging manner, "Colonel, Judge Berrien is in the Secretary's room and desires to see you." And Judge Berrien was then the Attorney General. I reported myself when the judge, holding the circular in his hand that I, a while before taking to Dr. Randolph, said to me, "Colonel, do you not know that this, holding the circular up to me, is not what the President wants?" "I know no more of the matter," I replied, "than what Dr. Randolph has communicated to me. He brought me the order for the Secretary of War and President and says it's exactly what they want." He then put the circular upon the table before him and added a paragraph saying, "This is what is wanted." I saw at a glance what was its object and aim, and that was, so far as I could go to accomplish it, the Cherokee government and resolve it into its former and scattered elements. Many years before, and at the instance, if I mistake not, of Colonel Meigs, it was by the then president that the amount paid for rations to feed the Indians when they were called together to receive each portion of the annuity should henceforth be paid in money to the authorities of the Cherokee Nation. They would account to the nation for the same. The sum, I think, was about $1,200. This amount had been remitted annually for many years for their annuities, and the Cherokees organized themselves into regular government with all the officers and their incumbents. This sum was put into their treasury as part of the nation's rights. Order forbidding the money to be any longer thus paid to the authorities of the nation was an order which struck directly at their system of government, looking to return to the old system of the distribution of the amount among the Indians, reducing them, so far as this item went, to their original elements. And this was the object of this circular. As in the business of sapping and mining to carry a fortress in a war, the first entrenchment, unseen, if possible by the enemy, must be made. On this, the first step, intended to be well covered, was taken towards the overthrow of the Cherokee government and a breaking up of the power of his people. I took the circular with Judge Berrien's additions to my copy clerk, Mr. Miller, and directed him to omit the customary headings of all writings emanating from my office, which was War Department, Office of Foreign Affairs, and headed War Department only. Copy being made, I took it to Dr. Randolph and told him, as this was an emanation direct from the War Department, it ought to be signed by him as acting Secretary of War.
Hi, Fred.
Certainly, said the doctor. Signed it, and it was sent off. The newspapers got hold of this move upon the Cherokee government. It's unbecoming a government like ours. The vex of war upon a feeble people who were just emerging from barbarism into civilization and from monarchy to a system of government, etc. and some not very complimentary remarks were made upon the acting Secretary of War for his manifesto. These assaults having reached the doctor, he came into my office quite excited and asked, "Sir, did you make me sign that paper?" "What paper?" "That circular to the Cherokees." "I referred its signature to you," I answered, "because it emanated from the Department of and not from me. I did not deem it proper for me to sign it, nor do I now. It's worked ill. I had no agency in it." He continued some time to be annoyed by the newspapers and did not seem afterwards to regard me with the usual civilities that had heretofore marked his intercourse with me. And I had at that time on hand the large book on the history, etc., of the North American Indians. It was in the hands of Samuel Bradford of Philadelphia's publisher. He needed rest from my labors, and withal I was not well. I requested and obtained to go and look after this work, and for relaxation and to better my health and extend my journey to New York. On my return to Philadelphia and on my way from the wharf to the hotel, I went to the post office and took a letter from Dr. Randolph informing me that from and after the first day of October next ensuing, which was 1830, services in the Indian Department would not be required. Returning to Washington, I inquired of him what the grounds of my dismissal were. "Why, sir," was the reply, "everybody knows your qualifications for the place. General Jackson has been long satisfied that you are not in harmony with him in his views in regard to the Indians, and thus closed my connection with the government." So he and Jackson were on opposite sides. Well, then he goes on to say, "These distressing intrusions continue to afflict the Cherokees, who in their midst maintain their position in the best manner they could, down to the day the instrument got up at New Eshota and miscalled a treaty, when a stronger force was employed and more direct movements were made to expel them from their country. The instrument was found in the person of Reverend Mr. Shimmerhorn, making of a final move upon the Cherokees. This gentleman, having secured the estate of Major Ridge and his son John and Elias Boudinot, all men of influence among the Cherokees, called the council to meet at New Eshota for the purpose of making a treaty for the full surrender of all but their country remaining to them on the east side of the Mississippi. The instrument bearing the title of treaty and purporting to be made with the Cherokee Nation was signed by the two Ridges and Boudinot and a few obscure individuals, and went on to Washington as the Act of the Nation, italicized. And in despite of the almost unanimous voice of the Cherokee population, declared the act done at New Eshota to be a fraud, and that it was the work of a few individuals only, and not of the nation, received, accepted, acted upon, and ratified. So that was his views on treaty with the Cherokees and what was happening with them under Jackson. So,
Oh, wow.
so these are more as John Ridge, those were also part of the Mckinney Matrix. And he goes on to say that Major Ridge and his son John, this was after the treaty had been signed, said on a visit to Philadelphia, spent some time with me when the subject of their agency in consummating the New Eshota Treaty, so-called, was discussed. Major Ridge, in reply to my reference to the period in which he had, in my opinion, placed himself, said, "I expect to die for it."
Wow.
The treaty, he admitted, was not made by the nation in opposition to its known and exposed will. He admitted also the only three names of influence attached to it were his own, his sons, and Boudinot's, that the stranger would not have signed with the same freedom a paper of any other sort. Why, I asked Major, expected your life to pay the forfeit, did you make that step? He said, I thought my people, his answer, were very unhappy where they were. Georgia was pressing hard upon them. Government at Washington would do nothing to relieve them. And he saw things getting worse and worse. And he thought if he could anyhow bring removal of his people, it would be for their present and future good, that he was old and his life would be of but little loss compared with such gain to them. And then he goes on, this, of course, John Ross is also from the Mckinney Hall. Oh, I'm not, one second. Some words. So I didn't do anything. It just be out of that.
Time's up.
Let's see if I can get you back in.
Because I can't start screen share while the other participant is sharing. Okay. Let's,
There we go.
okay, so we're back. Okay, well, then he goes on later and talks about John Ross. And he says, there's perhaps no man living who is better acquainted with John Ross than I am. My knowledge of him dates back as far as 30 years. I've known him in his official, personal, and private relation, in his official relations from the time he succeeded the Venerable Charles R. Hicks as principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, and personally before that time and ever since. It were a useless expenditure of time for me to dwell upon Mr. Ross's official character. This is stamped upon his entire career as chief of the Cherokees, and the ability and firmness and patience which has vindicated and maintained the rights of the Cherokees in the relations of the general government, the matters of record in the archives of the government, whilst the influence which he has exercised, has exerted over his people for their good are matters of public notoriety. That division should exist among his people is also most natural. That he should have enemies, implacable, bitter, relentless, is to share the lot of all who are patriotic and faithful, including our own Washington. But there's nothing more true than if left to themselves, the enlightened mind, mild, and specific counsels of Ross and his leading men, and intermeddling and vicious and avaricious white men, originated the elements of strife and thrown them in among the Cherokees. and promoted for their own ends the discords that have distracted that people, they would be at this moment harmonious, united, and happy. Mr. Ross is and has always been strictly temperate. In character, he is without reproach. As a father, brother, husband, friend, he is beloved and justly so. He is kind and courteous and unobtrusive, a man of few words but of sound, deep thinking, a high sense of honor, and of indomitable firmness. To his people, for whom he has endured much and been exposed to all sorts of personal hazards, he is devotedly attached, and except those who have been played upon and misled by intermeddling white men, is beloved and confided in by them. Proof of this reference need only be made to their continued confidence, as shown in his election for so long a period as a principal chief, both east and west of the Mississippi. With less of confidence in him on the part of the Cherokees, and less in foresight on his part, less devotion to him towards them and their interests, the partisan strife which has been made to distract the Cherokees must long before now have reduced them to insignificance and resulted finally in their extinction. It is to Ross's great prudence, self-command, intelligence, and firmness that this people owe their present freedom from far greater and more overwhelming calamities than have befallen them. So that was his opinion of Ross. But okay, I am